Are you addicted to chaos in your relationships? Let's talk about it. My name is Dr. Leslie Davis, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor and relationship expert located right outside of St. Louis, Missouri. And addiction to chaos, it's real. There's actually this thing called chaos addiction that I recently came across. And I want to share with you a few reasons why that happens. The first thing is chaos can feel familiar. Now, if you have grown up in a toxic environment, maybe your parents were fighting growing up, or you just had lots of family fights and arguments, that feels normal to you. And maybe you saw yourself repeat those patterns of toxicity in romantic relationships, friendships, or even work dynamics. And that shows up where you begin to feel that chaos is normal, and so you experience times, let's think about this. If you ever have a healthy partner or a secure partner that provides a safe space for you, that safety doesn't always feel safe. And in turn, you might find yourself creating chaos to get back to what feels familiar because you know how to operate in that space. Sound familiar to you? There's another reason why we might create chaos and we crave this chaos in relationships is because we experience an adrenaline rush when there's chaos. Chaos can cause us to experience our fight or flight syndrome. Fight or flight kicks in when we feel a need to protect ourselves. When we're in toxic relationships, there's going to be a need to protect yourself, either emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically. And when that chaos kicks in, fight or flight kicks in for self protection and self preservation. And you might feel good or feel excited when that happens. You might feel anxious too, let's be real, but that feeling feels electric and it feels energizing. And that feeling is what we crave sometimes. Another reason why we're craving chaos in relationships is we experience what's called the stress reward cycle. I want you to think about if you have ever had an argument with someone, and let's say it's your romantic partner. You have this argument, it's really heated, but afterwards you get a reward. Maybe you get time with that person. Maybe you get a gift. Maybe you get attention that you were actually seeking. And if you look back, you might recognize you created chaos in that relationship because you needed that reward. You needed their time. You needed their attention. So you go back to what feels familiar and what you know to do and how you know how to operate. And you create this chaos in the relationship because in the end, you're going to get something that you really wanted. Now, I've been there. I've done it. I think we all have. And it's toxic. I'm just going to call it what it is. So let's talk about the next thing that we might do to create chaos and why we might be addicted to it. So the last thing is that chaos can be a distraction from our responsibilities. If we have children and single moms, let's talk about it. We can get distracted so easily by our kids and all the things that they have to do. But when there's chaos in our relationships, our attention will go to that. We will go to fixing the problem with that person that we want to love or want to love us. And the chaos becomes a distraction from the things that are really important. It can also be a distraction from your personal goals. Now, if you're like me, you probably have a vision board. You probably are a goal setter. You're writing down goals for personal growth, professional growth, even relationship growth. And when there's chaos in a relationship, you don't have time to address your personal goals. But I'll throw something else at you. Consider if you struggle with imposter syndrome. If you feel like an imposter, you struggle with imposter syndrome, you have this internal struggle that you're not good enough, that you always have to be doing something extra just to prove your worth. And sometimes when you experience chaos in a relationship, that is a distraction from your imposter syndrome. It's a distraction from you achieving your goals. I don't like how that sounds. What about you? Now, if you're in this space where you're like, well, yes, I identified that I do crave chaos. I do enjoy the electric feeling of being in a toxic relationship. I do enjoy getting the attention that I receive after I create chaos and communication. And if you are ready to stop that toxic pattern, I want you to listen up. Got a few questions for you to ask yourself. The first question is, how can you identify what's unhealthy or toxic? Now, you need to take some time, sit with your patterns, right? And I want you to consider, what are you doing before the chaos? What are you doing during the chaos? And what are you doing after the chaos happens? If you go back to where it starts, what's going on with you before chaos erupts? Do you feel safe? Do you feel ignored? Do you feel misunderstood? Do you feel angry or irritable for whatever reason? Consider what feelings you're experiencing before you enter the space of chaos. Start to disrupt that pattern for yourself. Now, how do you do that? Well, let's talk about it. Next thing is, you might need to create new patterns of communication. Typically, when there's chaos, there's arguments, there's yelling, there's name calling, there's blaming. There is also the experience of shame. Now, when we need to create new patterns of communication, we have to think about both sides. Now, if you're the person who typically is the one pointing the finger, using words as verbal daggers, I want you to consider how you can shut that down. Not shut yourself down, but shut down the communication to the point where you can actually listen. Get to a space where you can hear the person you're communicating with. Get to a space where you can hear what they really need. And then identify what you need and start to communicate that in a healthy way. It doesn't mean yelling, fighting, doesn't mean getting aggressive, even physically. You got to reel that back in a little bit and find a way to get some peace in that conversation. Now, if you're the person, probably the avoidant attachment style person here, if you tend to retreat when there's chaos or retreat when there's an unwanted emotion, your challenge is to start speaking up. Now, we can create chaos even in silence. Let me tell you how that works. You might be in a relationship where your partner is the one that is the chaser or the pursuer, and they want to talk all the time, and that doesn't feel good. That feels chaotic to you. And so you retreat, which actually adds to the chaos because you're not allowing space for the person to say what they have to say, but you're also not allowing space for you to say what you need to say. So your challenge, if you're the person who retreats and likes to isolate when there's chaos, I want to challenge you to speak up. Consider, what is it that you really want to say? Consider, how are you feeling and how can you verbally express what is bothering you so you can learn to identify a new pattern of healthy communication and healthy dialogue. And the last thing I want you to ask yourself is, am I comfortable with silence? Am I comfortable with being still? Many of us aren't. Silence can feel scary. Maybe we've experienced times where there was silence in the home and there was this loud eruption of violence. Maybe we've tried to sit in silence and it's always disrupted by babies crying or the phone ringing or just all the responsibilities that we have. And so we don't get a chance to be still. So your challenge is to think and consider, how can I create an environment where silence feels good, where silence is healthy for me? Maybe you need to find a space in your home. It could be your car. Sometimes our car is the best place to just be alone and be still. But the challenge is not to be in a place of silence where you feel alone and lonely. It's okay to be alone, but when you experience the loneliness, that can be toxic, right? So pay attention to, what does this feel like to be silent and to be still? Challenge yourself this week to find a space where you can be quiet, where you can hear your own thoughts, where you can feel all your feelings and recognize that your emotions are signals. What are these emotions signaling you to do? If it's signaling you to go find chaos, challenge it, stop it. Okay. If it's challenging you to, or signaling you, sorry, to find love and peace, chase that. That's what we want. We want peace. We don't want chaos. Chaos, although it can be familiar, is not healthy. And in the end, it's just going to create more toxic patterns, especially if we're single moms. You are modeling behavior for your children. So consider, what patterns do you want your child to have when they're learning to deal with chaos in their relationship or learning to identify the chaos? How do you want them to resolve conflict in their relationships? How do you want them to be able to identify what they feel so they can respond to that in a healthy way? I hope this is helpful. Stay tuned for more topics about relationships and how we can really avoid the toxicity in relationships or address it. I know it's been a minute since I've been here, and I promised you guys I was going to do more videos, but for some reason, life has just been so busy. It's so good. I'm so blessed. But I will keep putting out this content, and I would love to hear your feedback. So please leave a comment below and share this with a single mom that you know this could be helpful for. All right. Have a great day. Bye.